touch the mics.
That one's off.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Lincoln Lancaster County Planning Commission of September 6th, 2023. A printed agenda is available outside the hearing room, and a copy of the full agenda, including the staff reports, is available online or at the Planning Department, room 213. The Open Meetings Act is posted just inside the doors at the back of the room. If you are parked in the parking lot across the street to the north, the gate is open and no parking coupons are needed. Out of courtesy for those attending this meeting, commissioners and the staff, cell phones may not be used in the chamber during any portion of this meeting. We appreciate your cooperation. Please note that the Planning Commission action today is final on the following items. 1.1, Use Permit 05002A. Any aggrieved person may appeal final action of the Planning Commission to the City Council or the County Board by filing a notice of appeal with the clerk within 14 days following the action of the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission action on all other items is a recommendation to the City Council or the County Board. The first item of business is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held August 23rd, 2023.
So moved, Campbell.
Second, Joy.
Ball.
Abstain.
Campbell.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Abstain.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Minutes approved.
The next item of business is the consent agenda. Items on the consent agenda will be called at the same time and will not be scheduled for a separate public hearing unless there is a request from someone wishing to speak or at the request of a commission member. I will ask Shelley to read all the consent agenda items into the record. Once those items are read, she will ask if there is anyone wishing to speak. If you wish to speak on an item on the consent agenda, we would ask that you stand and state that item. That item will then be removed from the consent agenda and scheduled as a separate public hearing under Section 3 of today's agenda. All items remaining on the consent agenda will be voted upon in total with a motion for approval. Shelley, will you please call the item on the consent agenda?
Item 1.1, Use Permit 05002A to amend existing Use Permit 05002 Northwoods Office Park to allow for an internal building increase of 4,728 square feet for office use on property generally located at 1150 North 83rd Street. This item is final action. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this item?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting this site to be disclosed?
No.
If there is anyone here wishing to speak on this consent agenda item, please stand.
Okay, we'll entertain a motion.
I would move that we approve use permit 05002A.
Second, Joy.
Ball.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Approved 8-0.
I will now ask Shelley to call the request for deferral.
We did receive written communication from the applicant requesting a deferral till the next Planning Commission hearing of item 4.2, change of zone 23054, which is from AG Agricultural District to H3 Highway Commercial District on property generally located at Northwest 48th Street and Highway 34. This will delay public hearing and action to the September 20th, 23 Planning Commission hearing.
Move to defer.
Second, Edgerton.
Okay, Shelley?
Ball.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Approved 8-0.
Is there anyone here who is wishing to speak on this application today? Okay. We will now proceed to public hearing. Prior to staff making a brief presentation, each staff person should state their name, agency, and address. The applicant will then be requested to present his or her testimony, followed by those who wish to testify in support, followed by those who wish to testify in opposition. The staff will then be given an opportunity to respond to the testimony, and then the applicant shall have an opportunity for rebuttal. If during your testimony you have copies of documents or materials you would like distributed to the Planning Commission members and/or included as part of the record, please provide that information to the clerk for distribution. Each person testifying should state their name and address and shall have 5 minutes to speak unless additional time is requested and granted. The timer will go off after 4 minutes. Then you will have 1 minute to wrap up your testimony. The Planning Commission will vote immediately at the close of the public hearing unless the Commission votes to defer action or to continue the public hearing. Shelley, please call the first public hearing item.
Item 4.1, change of zone 080574 to amend the University Place PUD, Plan Unit Development, by allowing the sale of alcohol for consumption on and off the premises closer than 100 feet to a residential zoning district on property generally located at 2737 North 49th Street. Are there any ex parte communications to be disclosed on this application?
No.
Are there any ex parte communications that took place or additional information you learned while visiting any of this site to be disclosed?
No.
Good afternoon, Brian Will, Planning Department, 505 South 10th Street, room 213. So the University Place PUD, so the graphic that I put up, is illustrated by this dark boundary here that essentially runs from a little bit north of Adams Street all the way down to Colby Street and about a block either side of the 48th Street. Essentially takes in all of that B3 zone commercial corridor, with the exception of this portion down here, which is also zone B3, but that is covered by a separate PUD, not part of the University Place planned unit development. So the request, let me use this one again here just for a sec. So for perspective, the property we're talking about today is sort of up at the northeastern corner here at this property. And if we look closer at the site plan, this is an existing commercial building. It's already built, this being the footprint of the building. Parking behind. If you go by and look at the building today, it has entrance doors on the west side and a couple, some outdoor area here as well. East side of the building, there is an entrance door. That's the one that's talked about in the report that the applicant has noted could be limited in use to emergency access versus primary access. So primary access is really off the west side of the building. So originally when this request came to the planning department, question about a liquor license, it was noted that it doesn't meet the requirements, the criteria for a special permit for on or off sale. It doesn't meet the required separation. And the separation that it fails, if we look at the zoning, this area here is zone B3, and then directly north across the street, and then east across the street, we have R6 zoning. And within that R6 zoning, we have a variety of single-family and multifamily dwelling units, but it's all zoned residentially. And so the measurement from this licensed premises to that residential zoning is less than 100 feet. So it can't meet the requirements for a special permit, so it failed. That part of the discussion stopped. However, because by virtue of the fact that it's located within University Place PUD, those zoning regulations, any and all of them, can be adjusted, varied, to meet the circumstances. And they have been with the University Place PUD over time. At the end of the staff report, I included the development plan, which is the text of those adjustments that have been granted over time. And so with this request, the applicant is going forward asking for the required separation from residential zoning to be reduced from 100 feet to 65 feet, which is allowed, which you can make that request under the PUD. So I noted in the staff report that there used to be a provision in this special permits themselves for alcohol, whereby you could request that that 100-foot separation be varied. That was removed in 2005, and since then, the 100-foot rule stands. If you don't meet the 100-foot test, you can't apply. And so since then, there haven't been any special permits that have gone through for anything less than that because of the fact that you can't apply, you don't qualify. So there was, as I noted, there really is no basis for comparison here with special permits. However, what I talked about was the B2 and the B5 zoning districts, which are other commercial zoning districts, where the sale of alcohol is allowed as a conditional use. And so the measurement criteria is different. So instead of just a straight line measurement from the licensed premises to residential zoning, it's measured from the doorway, primary public entrance, around the building to a residential zoning district, to a dwelling. And in this case, when I apply those standards, this facility or this licensed premises meets all those conditions. So I talked about those, went through those one at a time. If this were, it's not, if this were Zone B2, it does meet those criteria. So I talked about the original rationale for the University Place PUD was understanding its unique character. I mean, at the time it was developed, it has a unique land use pattern. And I think one of the reasons that those property owners at the time came forward and were supportive of the PUD is acknowledging that in an effort, I think, to remain competitive with those other commercial areas throughout the city. And so the PUD has allowed some uses, some unique features to be adjusted, varied, understanding the unique characteristics of the area. And so I think in the big picture, we find a use like this, what the applicant's describing, to be in character and to be in keeping with those attempts, understanding the unique character of University Place, and try to help it remain viable and competitive. So there is a condition of approval, and that is, we are recommending conditional approval, and that is that this east-west facing door be limited to only use as emergency access, and that there be no outside activities on the east side of the building. But otherwise, with that, Planning Department's recommending conditional approval, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Go ahead, Dick.
Brian, where, can you put that back?
Yep.
Can you point out again where that door is on the west side?
On the west side or the east side?
The west side.
I believe there's two doorways. I think there's one approximately here and another one approximately here.
And
I think
then,
there's two ways to get in. So like I said, this one, I don't know historically how it's functioned, but I don't see any problem with limiting its use as.
and then that building that's west of that, is that, I'm sorry, no, the one where the parking is, yeah, is that a building in there?
No, this is just parking. There's trees here. This
Got
is
it.
an open parking lot. This is their parking lot, and then it adjacent to another parking lot which serves these buildings here.
Okay, thanks, that helps clear it up.
Go ahead, Rich.
Are there any standards or regulations for an emergency exit that it remain locked and that maybe an alarm will go off if someone uses that as an egress?
Well, there are health, fire safety regulations that would apply. And like I said, I believe with two doors on the west side, there wouldn't be any issue with making that emergency access. Exactly the mechanics of how you do that, I don't know. crash bar, alarm, those sorts of things, we would make sure that, you know, at time of building permit, that that's done, but I think that's the way it would work.
Okay.
So Brian, I just want to clarify that the analogy in the staff report is comparing what could happen in B2 as of right.
Correct.
But on the other side, you've demonstrated that it is in B3, and since the regulations were changed in 2005, there have been no waivers of the requirements for B3.
Correct, with a special permit, right, because
A special
the
permit.
authority no longer exists.
But this isn't a special permit, this is a change of zone.
This is not a special permit. This is a unique circumstance. This is within the boundary of a planned unit development where any and all use and, I don't want to say all, but most use and lot area requirements can be waived or adjusted. So that's the unique thing here.
So if we compare it to a discussion that was in front of this board a few years ago with regard to open harvest, in that circumstance, they were not part of a PUD.
They were not. We had talked to them and some of their neighbors about joining together to create a planned unit development for that commercial area there at 1617 the South. They just couldn't get a consensus to do that. But that's the difference. They did not have a zoning overlay for a PUD, so they were left with only the route of the special permit.
But the zone was the same.
Yeah, I believe it was B3 zoning as well.
Okay.
Right.
But in drawing the comparison to B2, B2 is typically found in more suburban areas.
Yes, B2 is our commercial suburban zoning designation for your it's your equivalent to B3, but for the newer developing residential suburban areas. And so it's designed to fit next to residential setbacks, landscaping, screening, et cetera.
And other than this PUD and then the other one along Layton Street, the one that was separate, everything else really surrounding this is all some sort of residential zone.
Well, nope, just to the east and to the north.
Okay.
Here, sorry, let's go back to this map. So the property we're talking about is right here.
Yep.
So essentially everything to the west and then along the 48th Street corridor, this is all zone B3 PUD. It's only when we move to the east and then to the north.
Okay.
So this is at a jog in the boundary of the PUD.
But the
There's a
surrounding areas of the PUD are primarily residential.
Yes, all around, right. I mean, yeah, you've got the school here, which is P. You've got this the B3 for this PUD down here. But otherwise, pretty much characteristic of these old commercial areas. Right in the middle, I mean, sandwiched in close to neighborhoods.
Yep.
Yes.
Additional questions?
Nope.
Did anybody down here have a question?
I got it answered with
Okay.
that question.
And so when you were giving the comparisons of different properties within this planned unit development where liquor license have been allowed, those have been change of zones,
Well, they're part of the PUD.
right?
The planned unit development, change of zone. Yes, so they were approved as part of the PUD.
But do any of them, are they
Not
that
meet the
close?
requirement like
Because
this
they're-
one?
Like I was thinking, Mojava and Ville Grill, those are all on 48th Street.
Yes, they all otherwise,
I think Mojava's
they meet all the
a little-
requirements,
Yeah,
including the Walgreens, which
yeah, it's down there.
technically is by special permit, but it's part of the PUD. It has a special permit. Yes, Mojava meets the requirements. And I mentioned the Greens redevelopment that amendment that just came through recently, that had an adjustment to residential to 0 feet. But the distinction we made there was, it was residential within their own building, their own development, within the boundary of the PUD, okay? So, I mean, that's a little bit different than this. This is separation to residential beyond the boundary of the PUD.
And are there any that are not along 48th Street that have been approved?
Oh, Java technically is not. It's
It's within that building, but it's off to,
it's
yeah.
Yeah,
to
the
the alley.
Yeah, the
it's-
Bill Grill
there's
was on 48th. Yeah, I think Mojave is probably not right on 48.
but it's in that same building.
I can't think of any right off. Yeah, that aren't.
It said in the staff report in the application that the outdoor spaces that exist now on the west side would not be used for any kind of beer garden or smoking area.
Correct. In the applicant's application, he says no smoking or alcohol outside.
Okay.
Although they do plan some sort of live activities, music, drama perhaps, live performance, but no alcohol or smoking.
And the application, which is very much talking about creating kind of a community gathering center, but the change of zone would then impact future use. So
Yes,
if that is not successful, then any other additional commercial use could go into that space.
correct. So if this use were to, fail or outgrow its space and move on, then yes, the sale of alcohol is authorized at
Because it
this
could-
location on and off sale, correct?
Just operate as a bar.
Yeah.
True, but they'd still have to get a liquor license.
License, right.
Yeah, I mean, they'd
Yeah.
have to go through
Right.
the other
Yeah.
requirements.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
thanks. All right, we'll now have testimony from the applicant.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for your service to Lincoln. My name is John Osiri, and I am very pleased to be here. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks, Brian, for the presentation. What we're trying to do
We need
in
your
the
address really quick.
the address is 2737 North 49th Street, Lincoln, Nebraska. So what we're trying to do there is to create what I call an intellectual and cultural exchange space. So it's not a bar, it's not a restaurant, it's not a club. It's just a space where people can come and have an intellectual and a cultural exchange. And this has been informed by my background and the background of my colleagues who are also behind me today. We plan to sell artwork. We have some amazing cultural artifacts from different countries, especially Africa, that we plan to exhibit and sell there. We're also going to be selling some canvas paintings also from different parts of the world. In terms of food, we don't have a commercial kitchen, so we're going to cater and bring those in, again, featuring international cuisine there as well. In terms of alcohol, very important, but is only a piece of the whole pie. We also plan to feature international wine, but also very especially the famous African palm wine as well. So that's why we are here before you to seek this approval. We've taken time, my colleagues and I, to talk to our neighbors, not only to get their support, but also want them as customers. And many of them said, yeah, we would love to come and be part of it. We always invite them to come and actually see what we are doing right now and provide their input as we are getting the place ready. I have to say, the place has been empty for some time now, since COVID. It's been empty, and it's been actually draining for us, economically and otherwise. But we are happy that we think we found an opportunity for us to create something great for Lincoln and for that space. Let me also add that we are part of an effort to help the space, the whole area that is called the UNI Place, become what is called a creative arts district. You may have heard about it. We are part of that conversation. What we want to do is to feature artwork, feature music, feature theater. So the team that is working on this includes ourselves, the theater department from Nebraska Wesleyan University, the Locke Center for the Arts, and a few other businesses around the area. We believe in the UNI space. I've had the property for some time, and it is very near and dear to my heart, and I think it's a unique opportunity for us to create something really unique and offer something that Lincoln can be proud of. So that is my presentation, and I thank you for your audience. Perhaps I will come back again to shed more light on what we are trying to do there in case there are any questions. Thank you so much.
Other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now take testimony in support of this application. Anyone here to speak in support? Testimony in a neutral position or testimony in opposition?
Good afternoon, Derek Aldridge. I live at 7401 South 37th Street here in Lincoln. My wife and I own the property immediately to the north of the subject property, 4842 Madison Avenue.
It takes a minute.
Thank you. 4842, it's immediately north, it's this parcel property, excuse me. Yep, it's this property right here.
Yeah, there you go.
We bought this house a couple of years ago. We have a son that goes to college at Nebraska Wesleyan University. He lives there, has a couple of roommates, college kids. This is a residential area, right? As I submitted a letter in opposition, I'm just going to touch on that briefly. This is a residential area. According to what I've found, I don't know this from personal knowledge, but according to Lancaster County records, my house was built in 1911. The house to the west was built in 1910. The house across the street was built in 1915. This has been residential much longer than it's been a PUD or a commercial zoned area. This residential area is important. We also have Nebraska Wesleyan a block away. We've got a church just a block away. A lot of residential character to this neighborhood. A couple of points I'd like to make, and maybe Mr. Osiri has abandoned this, but one of the comments that was made was that there was going to be a grocery store in this facility. There just isn't room for that. If you look on the diagram that he's supplied, it's part of the planning report. Right here, this area right here, it's about a 9 by 15 area. That's not a grocery store. It's not even the same size as a convenience store. So grocery is really not what this is about. To Mr. Will and his staff report, I really appreciate the work that the planning department does for this in educating the commission, but I really believe that the standard here was wrong. There's been a lot of focus on how to emphasize the PUD, and as he admitted that there's been no exception made since 2005, since the ordinance was changed in the city. There's really no reason to make the focus on how to make the PUD better and to just ignore what's going on with the residential community around it. There should be an equal balance between the rights and privileges and benefits that the residential neighbors have and what the PUD has. Mr. Osiri buys the property with constructive knowledge that that's the limitation that this property had and will have, and I believe that should stand. A couple of other points that I have here briefly. Hours of operation. In the report, it talks about hours of operation to be 7 a.m. to 2 a.m. I mean, we're talking again, a lot of activity going on late into the evening in a residential area. Obviously, bringing alcohol into the mix, and then we're talking about parking. It's been indicated that there are 12 parking stalls on the premises. Mr. Osiri indicates that his capacity is 49 people. You can do the math. requires 4 persons per car for that parking lot. People aren't driving with 4 people in a car anymore. So we know if they were to max capacity, there's going to be more than 12 cars at the site. Where are they going to park? They're going to park on the street. And it's going to add to congestion in the neighborhood and traffic, et cetera. A couple of other things. This application was filed by an LLC called Best Kept Secret LLC. It was just formed in June of this year. We don't have any history about the LLC. We don't know anything about who the liquor manager is going to be on the application, about whether there's any chance for this LLC and this business to succeed. And I would believe that what this really is doing is it's setting up, if this business fails, the next owner of this property to have one less hurdle in front of them in order to be able to just convert this to a bar or whatever else they want to convert it to.
One more minute.
With that, I'm available to answer any other questions you have. If not, I want to thank you for your time this afternoon.
Questions? No.
Thank you.
Is there any other testimony in opposition? All right, staff questions.
Yeah. Mr. Aldridge mentioned parking. We didn't really talk about parking previously. Can you share your perspective on that?
Yep. Yes. Parking has been, well, first of all, B3, 1 space per 600 square feet is one of the lowest parking requirements in the zoning ordinance. Plus, it's been further adjusted by the PUD. So by the requirements of PUD, it meets the off-street park. I mean, Uni overall doesn't have enough parking for all the commercial space throughout using standards for other commercial centers in the city, which is typically 1 to 300. So, but by the PUD, it has required parking.
Would they be able to also use the public lot to the west, those 40-plus parking stalls?
Well, I mean, a public lot, anyone can use them.
Okay,
They're
just I
not-
didn't think they
Yeah,
were
they're not
assigned.
dedicated to this use or any particular business, but
Okay.
anybody's free to use them.
I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't already assigned.
Yeah. yeah.
Okay, perfect.
So when was the PUD created?
This one dates back, I think it's like 2000, 2008.
Okay.
So been around for a
But,
while.
so prior to that, it was just in whatever the zoning was before the,
It was B3. Prior to that,
It was just B3
B3
straight.
zoning. Correct.
in the same composition that it is currently, just not within the PUD.
Say that again. I didn't.
Along 48th Street, in basically the same places that it is with. the
Yes,
PUD.
it did, right. It did not, the PUD didn't expand the B3 zoning, I don't believe anywhere. I think it used the existing boundary. Like I said, with the exception, it didn't include that area down at Layton, Layton and 48th, which is its own PUD now. I think it just used the existing B3 district to draw the boundary.
And when that PUD was created with the B3, would it have allowed alcohol sales in that area at that time,
In which area?
when the PUD was created?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, well, yes, within the, I mean, if I'm following you right, within,
So when it was
mean in this
created in
building?
2004, the PUD, the whole area.
Oh.
So at that point, when it was created, was there ability to have alcohol sales in that PUD?
yeah, it would have been the same circumstance we're in today. First, we've talked about a special permit and just making that part of the PUD if you met all the requirements. But if you didn't, like this one, then you would be amending the PUD to adjust those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Okay?
If there was not a PUD, this would be dead in the water, right?
Yes,
There
if-
is
if-
no way to.
By virtue of the PUD is the only reason you're having the discussion today. If it were left only If it were just B3 zoning and you needed a special permit,
No way.
no alcohol.
And this has only been in existence since 2008, the
The
PUD.
PUD was adopted, yes, back around 2008.
And the building is it's just been used as like an office building, right? It's not it's not residential.
No,
It's
no,
not been used
it's,
as residential, it's been used as
yeah,
a
it's definitely a commercial building, just a
space.
one-story, rectangular, not a lot of windows, but it's a commercial building.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about the Creative Arts District?
I can't tell you a whole lot about it, except that that's what I've heard. I mean, I've heard that there is sort of this, this movement, this consensus among some of the business owners in the area to do that. I mean, I think it sort of plays on the unique character of University Place, which was probably part of the reason for originally adopting the PUD. But I'm just not the right guy to talk to you about that in detail.
Well, and that's a state designation, right, through the Arts Council, that you can create a creative district. Other questions? I guess not. Thank you. All right, applicant rebuttal, if you would like to come.
To Mr. Aldridge, I have to say that I wish I had opportunity to talk to him before here, because we took time to go to all our neighbors. Of course, obviously, we didn't have the luck to find everybody. I have signed copies, names and numbers of both mostly residential occupants in the area and some businesses as well. So, and they gave their numbers to say, hey, they can call us to verify. In fact, I actually did have a signature also from someone who's in that property as well. I understand whenever we hear alcohol, I mean, the bells goes off ringing, because we could imagine some people who don't mean well may come to have access to alcohol or do all kind of stuff. Let me say this: I am a trained seminarian. I went to seminary school for 6 years. I mean, just to let you know the background I'm coming from. And my managers, we have two managers here, Tochi Uwakeme, because again, he asked about who are the managers. Tochi has already been a background, myself and himself. He's from West Africa. He has 3 master's degree, and he also have a cybersecurity certification from Harvard, just to, again, let you know the kind of people that we're inviting to help us with what we're trying to do in that space. The other manager is Nataro. Rick Nataro is a native Nebraskan. Maybe you can raise your hand, Rick. And he hasn't been background yet, but I can tell you he will pass. He's currently a security detail at various airports. He's a consultant at various airports for those kind of things. So we do have good people who are going to be providing watchful eyes. If anything, what we are doing, we bring beauty and sanity and love, if I may add that, to the space. Since taking on that building, maybe he can attest to that we have transformed even the outside. Personally, I have planted over 10 trees and some flowers outside of that building in the effort to make sure it looks very beautiful as we get on this effort. Yes, it has been empty. Like I said earlier, it's been empty. So we just registered the LLC Best Kept Secret not too long ago, because we want to embark upon this. We cannot start doing business until we get approval. So we want to make sure we are going by the laws, which is why we are here today. So I hope some of these, again, lay off some of your concerns. Again, I do have that paperwork. I did make copies for Brian, and I do have 2 additional ones that I got this morning. We started this effort in the summer, and we continued until yesterday. Thank you very much.
I do have a question
Yes, please,
for
yes.
you. One of the things that was brought up was the idea of grocery space.
yes.
Could you address that for us,
Indeed,
please?
actually, so what happened was during our conversations with the neighbors, they said, hey, it would be nice if you actually sell groceries there so that we don't have to go to Walmart to buy things in the morning. So what we're thinking about doing is actually featuring some dry food and some light groceries. Yes, it's not going to be a full-blown grocery store. This is really a response to what some of the neighbors have asked us. In fact, we took some notes when we talked to the neighbors, and I have some comments. I think they said something like eggs, fresh produce, that they can just come in and, yeah, I had it right here. So they said bread, milk, snacks, eggs, so things of that sort they could just stop by and pick up. And we like the idea because it will help us bring in the neighbors, and then we can tell them what's happening maybe in the evening as well, so they could come back as well. So that was where that idea came from. Actually came from the neighbors of the community.
Thank you very much.
Indeed.
Questions? All right, thank you very much.
I would move that we close the public hearing.
Second, Joy?
Ball,
Yes.
Campbell,
Yes.
Cruz,
Yes.
Edens,
Yes.
Edgerton,
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Public hearing closed.
I would move that we approve change of zone 08057F.
Second, Joy?
All right, discussion.
I think this is a unique in business involvement that they're bringing forth, and I think would be an addition to University Place. I don't see this as being like a typical bar situation. It's geared more towards the arts and events and other things like that. So I will be supporting this motion.
I also will be supporting this motion. When I toured the site or drove this around the site, the neighborhood sides have very limited windows up high. And if we have that, or if they have that exit door to the east as an emergency only, it really lends itself nicely to trying to be unobtrusive to the neighborhood. And then looking at the parking lots to the west, they have the 12 stalls on site and the 40-plus stalls in the public lot, that are 2 hours, if I remember, but I wanted to make sure they weren't assigned to some different businesses. And so that gives a nice ability, if they do have some evening opportunities for parking, that would take it off-street in that respect.
When I first read this, I struggled a bit with the balance of, the balance of it being surrounded by residential, with the idea of a new space creating community and bringing folks together and getting a little bit more of a feel for what the vision is, was very helpful. I go back to, I asked the question earlier about open harvest. That was really hard. It was a really hard conversation because that was again, a community builder in that neighborhood, but was just too close to that boundary. And I think many of us felt like our hands were tied in helping that business do more to promote what it was trying to accomplish in that area. And if there had been a way around that, I think many of us were looking for that. We have that in the PUD structure. The fact that it already is in a PUD enables us to be more flexible than if it was just in strict B3 zoning, which it was previously. That was the whole point of the PUD system, was to provide that flexibility and enable folks to think outside the box. And as neighborhoods evolve, certainly is in a place that has evolved and grown over time, it gives us an opportunity to serve our community in a different way. And again, they still are responsible for all the liquor licensing and all the other laws that are in place to protect the neighborhood. And because of that, because of the opportunity to build community and the fact that we have the PUD structure, I will support this.
Gloria?
Here, the place I struggle on is not what Mr. Arias, if I pronounced that wrong, I apologize, is trying to accomplish here. I think it's a great project. My struggle is if it doesn't make it, what comes in next? And because this has effects for long term, how do we balance that on next comes in a bar, which we don't necessarily want on that property? In those B2 units, we're building new structures. When you move in, you know you have a bar underneath you. In this, these houses have been there for a long time. It's been a long time residential area, predominantly college students, mixed. And how do we balance that? Yes, this activity is perfect. Would love to see it put in there. And who doesn't like to sip a glass of wine when you're looking at some art? So I get that. But how do we balance that with what comes next? Because I've seen a lot of nonprofits with the best of intentions not make it.
Well, I mean, part of the balance, I would say, is that we are restricting egress, and that's part of this process. We're restricting the outdoor areas, and that's also included in that. And so any bar or the next tenants that would come in would still be beholden by those limitations, which might be enough to keep them from wanting to be in that space. It's not quite as open-ended as it could be in other places.
Well, and I think, Tracy, to your comment about you still have to then be able to apply and be approved for a liquor license if that's the... Did you have other comments? Sorry, Gloria.
I think something that, just because I know this area pretty well in terms of its efforts to be a creative arts district and what's around it, you have support from neighbors like Blixt, which is a theater organization. You have support from Nine Muses and some other organizations that are arts oriented. I don't know that it would necessarily be easy or feasible to make this into a full-blown bar. I also don't think that the parking is going to be as big an issue as people think it is. It's a college area. You're going to attract ostensibly college students and graduate students who, are hopefully going to be just walking to and from this area. So I don't know that I'm particularly worried about the traffic and parking. I see this as a win-win for the neighborhood and for establishing, again, those kinds of community connections. So I intend to support it as well.
I think the work that the University Place, businesses and nonprofits and cultural organizations, the work that they've put in over the past several years to create a really vibrant space and create a sense of community, and I really commend what has been happening there, and I see this as an opportunity to add to that, and I want to thank the applicant for thinking of a kind of creative way of bringing people together. And I think it may sound different than a traditional, because you're combining it and creating it as a community conversation space, may feel different for people, but I'm thinking about when you travel and thinking about bringing new ways of people to gather, and thinking about kind of the bodega kind of thing about where do you get your essentials when you just need to run in and grab one or two things, and if that is a way of helping to support nonprofit efforts and probably would cost less than running to a convenience store, then that's also a win for the neighborhood. So I will be voting in support and really look forward to the development. Shelley?
Ball.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Joy.
Yes.
Rodenberg.
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
Approved 8-0.
At this time, anyone wishing to speak on an item not on today's agenda may do so.
I would move that we adjourn.
Second, Joy.
Ball.
Yes.
Campbell.
Yes.
Cruz.
Yes.
Edens.
Yes.
Edgerton.
Yes.
Joy,
Yes.
Rodenberg,
Yes.
Ryman Yost.
Yes.
We are adjourned.